Hi, this is Rob Bowron with Sharp College Football. Today we're going to talk about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, an interesting team. They're all interesting teams. An interesting team for 2020. I'm also going to wait and... Hey, audio sounds good. So, the Irish come into this season... We're not projecting them into the top 10 quite. We have them projected at number 12 coming into this year. That follows up from a year where they were at 13 in 2019. And the year before that, in 2018, they were all the way at number 11. So Notre Dame is, they seem to have found a niche in college football, just right outside the top 10. Brian Kelly is the head coach of the Irish. He's been there. He's been there a while, and the title of this video, I think, hits on this because I think with a lot of college football programs, you do end up often running into, a little dissatisfaction, at finding the ceiling, the program sometimes, and you can run into that and then find you've fired a good coach and hired a bad one. Notre Dame seems to be okay with how Kelly's delivering. They have this contract now. They play with I wouldn't call it a contract, but they've joined the ACC in everything except football. The ACC does provide them with ACC games every year now that they play. That's really been to their benefit because for the most part, if you can avoid Clemson these past couple of years, the ACC is nothing special. And so Notre Dame's been able to often, and Kelly, they've put together some fairly gaudy records at times, including, 2 years ago when they went to the playoff. It got housed, but, when they went to the playoff, they are a team that, because of, as long as they're sort of traditional opponents, that are going to be on the schedule every year, and their ACC, schedule doesn't include Clemson or, maybe a resurgent North Carolina with Mac Brown. They're going to be in a spot where they're going to pile up some wins, that's going to look good. The trouble, of course, runs into is, once you see them on the, on the playoff stage against, the programs that, if you get into the playoff, you are likely in, if you're in that 3-4 spot, you're going to get stuck with, last year they were really, with Alabama after Tua's injury, there were really 3 great teams in college football. You're almost always guaranteed that they're going to be at least 2. And really since 2017, the space between those teams at the very top of college football and really everyone else has grown. Nick Saban plays offense now. Alabama's got one of the best and has had one of the best offenses in college football. You're not going to get by, and I am still sort of perplexed at people that really haven't figured out where, and this may not end up being a long-term trend. So, everybody could come back to earth, but, teams that are still sort of relying on this, we're going to be a defense-first team, and, the offense will just kind of muddle along, and with that, we're going to meet whatever our goals are for the program. College football does not work that way right now, at all. Now, Brian Kelly is not in that mode. He is not, just hiring a ho-hum offensive coordinator because he's got his defense figured out. You could also argue that, Lincoln Riley has had his offense really figured out, and he's in the other boat. He really needs to get the defense going in order to compete. But, really, when you look at the programs right now that are at the pinnacle of college football, and really, I'm talking about this because, and we'll talk about this with a lot of the programs as we get through the rest of the previews. That's where a lot of their expectations are. Notre Dame doesn't compete for a conference. They will this year, but they don't compete for a conference title, mostly. Their expectations are to go out and compete at the national level. But I say this like Kelly seems to be very good, and he seems to have settled into very good. I don't know that he's going to get you to great. And Notre Dame seems okay with that right now. Anyway, so I mean, that Clemson game in the playoff was no accident. That was a measure of how far behind really the Irish are. Both in recruiting and player development and scheme. They have some work to do ahead of them, I think, if they really want to be at that level in college football. And like I said, I think the expectations for most Notre Dame fans really still are in that range. I don't know if that's necessarily realistic, but that's where they are, right? And Notre Dame's going to have to, if they want to get up to there, they're going to have to either pick it up across the board and excel at things in the way that other programs really excel across the board, or they're going to have to just be so unbelievably good with scheme. I mean, like taking what Charlie Weiss used to say about having like distinct, schematic advantage or something along those lines, but like for real, like in real life, not in Charlie Weiss's head. So for the Irish, I think as we look, what they project at this season, at 12, we're not expecting the world from them. We're not expecting them to really fall off much either. I mean, they have a decent amount of production returning. About 59% of their production's back. They're at 83 in returning production. They were at 25 in special teams last season. That's good. I mean, they could definitely, it's odd to say, you don't say this about a lot of teams, but for Notre Dame, where they graded out last season, if the special teams had been in the top 10, and oddly enough in that 2000, the season 2 years ago, they did have the number one special teams unit in the country, but if their special teams were back in the top 10, that would probably have inched them up into the top 10 in beta rank last season. So for them, I think as we look at this, then, where you start to get into where there is enough distance is you start to get into it with recruiting. They're recruiting number 13 overall in recruiting. There's some distance between where Alabama sits and LSU sits and Georgia sits. And Clemson's made it up a little more with, player development, than, some of those other schools have. But, Notre Dame doesn't grade out in the top 10 in player development, coaching and development either. Right. I mean, there's some work to do for this Irish program to get over the hump. And it's not to say like being very good in college football is very hard. And I don't want to take away, I feel like we can end up looking at where programs want to be and where they say they want to be and what their goals are, and I realize that every program sets like basically the same goals at the beginning of the season, win the conference. I mean, Notre Dame, you could set that this season, win the conference championship, and then, figure it out from there. But I mean, some programs really also in the back of their head are thinking make the playoff, potentially play for a national title. It's not realistic for Notre Dame, at least as far as that last one, like win a national title or even win a game in the playoff. They have some work ahead of them to get there. It's interesting to see how they're going about this and whether, and I say this is this as good as it gets? Because I don't know that a lot of the, be it in the hires or in, in the staff that they put together to try to do, in recruiting, it doesn't feel like there is a sense of immense urgency to catch up with where Alabama and Clemson, you could argue LSU got last year, Georgia really are right now. And Ohio State, I'm leaving out the Buckeyes. I mean, and the Buckeyes, who are rolling under Ryan Day. So let's get into the numbers. We're already at 10 minutes talking about Notre Dame expectations. How can we? So, I want to repeat, what Brian Kelly has achieved is awfully hard to do, and the consistency that he's been able to find there for the most part is really also very hard to do. So I don't want to take away from what is a hard job and what is a significant accomplishment on its own for Kelly. So let's jump in and look at what the actual offensive numbers are for this Notre Dame squad. Okay, audio is still good. So last season they were 22 on offense. that is not great. They're just barely outside the top 20 in offenses in college football. But really for it to grade out where you want to be with Notre Dame, you really need to be in the top 10 of offenses in college football. Really, as we talked about with Texas, yesterday, you really need to be cutting into getting close to the top 5, right? Because the distance there, it gets harder to make those jumps, right? Because the offenses in the top 5, the distance between 1 and 2 is greater than the distance between 10 and 11. It's not just people think of it because we do all these rankings that it is a same stepwise function upward. It is not. It is it is an increase as you go along. So in that sense, it's almost exponential. It's not really exponential, so don't think of it that way. But as you get out to the tails, the distance between the top offenses and then even to a lesser extent the top defenses gets wider. So Notre Dame, 22 overall on offense. They're at 28 on drive efficiency last season. That's something they're really going to have to clean up and be better at. Just not enough long drives, not enough execution. The play calling has to improve. The explosive drives there at number 33. That's a big no-no. Like they really need to be better at putting up big plays coming into next year. Number 7 in play efficiency. They were good at putting up yards per play, controlling for opponent and field position. I think what's key here is, and this is where I think BetaRank excels, is it's not just per play, right? Like per play metrics can lead you astray. I don't mean for that to rhyme like that, but drives, like the goal here is to put up points. And so like what you're doing in any individual play may not help you out that much. Notre Dame was really good at putting up yards per play last season. What they weren't great at was putting points on the board comparatively when you compare it to the rest of their numbers. And really too many 3 and outs, turnovers, negative plays, that negative drives number at 38. That's, again, something they're just going to have to clean up. So they did have a decent run-pass split last season. They were better passing the ball than they were running the ball. Number 45 in effective rush, number 29 in effective pass. They have a new offensive coordinator coming in, a familiar name, of course. Tommy Rees comes in as the OC. He replaces Chip Long. Long, they've been kind of treading water a little bit sort of the best way to describe it offensively. They really did need to, take a bigger step forward than they'd been able to, under Long. It makes sense to make a move here. It's interesting going with Rees. I think Rees is a really well-regarded guy, a young guy, obviously, that they're handing the reins over to here. But man, when you're Notre Dame, like you don't have to go out and you better they must have a lot of confidence. You don't have to make this hire, right? Like you can go out and, make another hire, go out and try to get a big name, try to do what Penn State did, and get Minnesota's OC. There are only so many, Kurt Shirakas running around out there, but those guys like Notre Dame could go out and compete and maybe try to get a Joe Moorhead that ended up going to Oregon. Tommy Rees, they're putting a lot of faith in him because this offense does need to get better and does need to be more of the engine of this team as they compete. So they were at 21. A good reason for Chip Long to get moved along is they were at 21 and 18. They're really just kind of hanging on and kind of like just a better than average Power 5 offense is kind of where they were sitting. But there are some real positives on this offense. So number 33 in Pro Football Focus's QB ratings, Ian Book is there. They liked a lot of what they saw out of him. He closed the season pretty strong. He's going to have, for this offense to take a step forward, he's going to have to be better next season than he was there, and be able to, be more consistent, play like he did down the backstretch last season throughout the season. Number 13 in Pro Football Focus's offensive line grades. That's really good. And, they were better in pass protection than they were in their run grade, but still very good in their run grade. I think this really speaks to their play efficiency number here, that they were pretty successful there. They really did need a change at play caller. This should help. Should help. Notre Dame is, if they're at number 13 in recruiting, it's not as if they're totally bereft of talent or anything along those lines. With the right scheme, this can be a top 5 offense. They really have to get better schematically and with play calling. And that's really been, I mean, for lack of a better way to put it with Kelly, like, I mean, for a guy that, made his bones coming up at, Central Michigan and Cincinnati, really on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, the offense that they've had, under Kelly here has been in this range. I mean, Mike Sanford, who's now the offensive coordinator at Minnesota, put together some pretty meh offenses in South Bend. So there's a lot of work, I think, for this Irish offense. They're at 63 in returning production on this side of the ball. I think that they, with Book back, and a reasonable amount of production coming back on this side of the ball, I think that they could potentially be in the teens if Rees has it together. Like they're putting a lot of faith in him. Anytime you have someone who this is their first job as an OC or play caller, mileage may vary. So this could go a lot of ways. But if it is an improvement, because I don't think that they were getting the most out of what they had, with what they were doing, the last couple of years under Long, then, Notre Dame, I think absolutely has the talent to end up, in the teens, and maybe knocking on the top 10. That would be significant improvement. And that would be something that they could potentially build on going into next year. So on the defensive side of the ball, they're good. And I really like what they've done here, because you can see some real continuous improvement from this defense. So they were at number 11 in beta rank last season. That's very good, just on the cusp of the top 10. Their drive efficiency number at number 19 is good. They could certainly improve there if you look across their metrics. And that's one of the big ones in beta rank. Like, I mean, being either stopping or putting together long drives to prevent points is one of the keys to being a good college football offense or defense. Number 19 in drive efficiency, they could work there on it, like a little better play calling, a little more consistency and execution there. But explosive drives, this is a solid number. Like they didn't give up big plays. Their play efficiency number is very good. They managed to control yards per play, make opponents earn it. Then negative drives, that's a real solid number at 13. Like they were able to force some 3 and outs, force some turnovers. Where they struggled a little bit, 20 in effective rush, 10 in effective pass. I mean, they could definitely clean it up a little bit in the run, in the run defense. That would certainly help them next season. Clark Lee is their defensive coordinator. He's been there for 3 seasons as the DC after you could almost say the Brian Van Gorder fiasco. It didn't work in South Bend. I think for like when you could see them, like they were at 15 and 18, they were in the 20s and 17. Like you could see a real steady progression here. This year, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge for them to continue that improvement, if only because they're just at 100 in returning production. And, defense is more correlated with recruiting than it is for, returning production. That said, it still matters. This defense, I still expect them to be a top 15-ish defense. I don't know that this is the year they come into the top 10. So there's definitely, you can feel like they're starting to get this side of the ball really dialed in, and working, potentially with, with a little more time with Lee. I think they will get into regularly being a top 10 defense. And that's a really solid thing to build off of. If they can get the special teams working again, get the offense going, then Notre Dame is going to be, and you don't want to be that team that comes into the playoff and is automatically a huge underdog, right? Like you want to be the team that comes into the playoff and is like a 7-point underdog, that you only need 1 turnover or just to play a really good game and, you can pull it off. So let's look at the schedule. It's interesting. They have a conference schedule this year. I'm sure everyone's covered that ad nauseum. So Notre Dame, we have them at audio's still good. So this is the schedule that was. I mean, a lot of familiar names here. It's nice to have Arkansas. If you're going to play a Power 5 team, play Arkansas or an SEC squad. That's the team you want to play. Notre Dame, obviously big favorites there. As you come through here, I mean, like Notre Dame would have likely done fairly well here. The tough games are, that game where we have them projected, Wisconsin, that game's not going to happen. The Badgers aren't going to play till the spring. In the Clemson game, Notre Dame still, though, I mean, with 8.96 wins, expected wins out of 12, you could easily see them getting to double-digit wins again, if they, manage to either upset Wisconsin or Clemson or just really not, go through the rest of their schedule without really dropping a game that they would have been expected to win. Because for the most part, through the rest of these games, Notre Dame's a fairly big favorite, right? Most of these ACC teams are just not. They're better. We're projecting them to be a little improved over where they were last year, but for the most part, still not very good. I would say, though, that the one to watch out that would have been on there that would have been interesting is the model is under projecting USC, we believe. I would have had that game as really just a toss-up, on the road. So that's the schedule that was. This is the schedule that is. So if you look over there on your left, that's the schedule that is. So it's ACC only right now. I don't think Notre Dame, I mean, the ACC teams, I believe, are allowed to play one non-conference game with an in-state school. I don't think that there is a school that is also in their state. I don't think that there is anyone in Indiana that is playing. So Notre Dame, I don't know that they're beholden to that rule, but they likely are, having agreed to play in the ACC this year fully. But to go through this, Duke, we've got, Notre Dame with a 93% win probability. They'd be roughly a 20-point favorite in that game. Wake, about a 95 win probability, about a 21-point favorite in that game. Florida State will be, it's really going to depend a lot on where that offensive line is and what they're able to help Norvell do in year one. But about a 10-point favorite in that game and about an 80% win probability. Louisville, we really like the job that they did last season, particularly in getting the offense going again under Scott Satterfield. But their record was a little better than they were in advanced stats last year. Notre Dame, we like them with an 82% win probability here and about an 11-point favorite there. Pitt, about an 86% win probability and roughly 14.5. Georgia Tech, again, an 86% win probability and 14.5. Clemson, flip that. Clemson, we project to be really good next season, and we expect Notre Dame to only have a 0.14 win probability in that game and to be a 14.5-point underdog there. Boston College, about an 84% win probability for the Irish, a 12-point favorite there. UNC, this will be a really interesting game if it takes place. Notre Dame is a 0.67 favorite there, 67% win probability, about a 5-point favorite, in the projection model right now. I would say one of the interesting things when you think about that game, though, is that it's really, for me, as it comes down to two things, is where is UNC's defense, in the second year under Jay Bateman, and where is Notre Dame's offense in the first year under Tommy Rees. That game could be a lot closer, right? I mean, that game might be a toss-up by the time that actually rolls around. But then you have Syracuse, 96% win probability and a 21-point favorite. So when you look across here, Notre Dame is a huge favorite over most of these games. And really, other than the Clemson game, doesn't have a single game that they wouldn't be a favorite in against this ACC schedule. They've got 6.93 expected wins in the ACC this season. That puts them in a really good spot where they could, really potentially compete for an ACC title, and particularly if they get some luck, if they got stuck playing Clemson, I think they could overcome that with some turnover luck, It's not out of reach for them. I mean, it's probably 2 or 3 turnovers actually against Clemson, so maybe it is a little out of reach. But the for the rest of these games, as long as the Irish project for the most part to be good enough to win, even if they don't bring their A game. So, avoiding, an upset really, or, like keeping an eye on that North Carolina game, it's really the only one that might be a little closer. Florida State, depending on where, that offensive line is. But most of the rest of the schedule is pretty soft for the Irish, and really getting Wisconsin, off the schedule helps, quite a bit as well. Also, it'll be interesting to see where Navy is without Perry, but, the model likes Navy coming into this season after their incredible bounce back year last year. So the Irish, it's not, this could be, if you're going to have a year to go and play in a conference, this schedule, so long as you're able to tighten up that Clemson game, the Irish may have fond memories about their, their 1 year in conference play. So yesterday on the Texas video, for some reason, the switch over here sent the audio into underwater land. Let me listen and see. I apologize that we have to do this. All right, we're good. I don't want to sit around. I hate sitting around with the earphones on the whole time. It feels like dork overkill. Yeah, so we will avoid that. Anyway, so to wrap it up for the Irish, I think that there are, there are some things to be interested and excited about with this team. I think what you really have to look for, though, is where's the offense? I mean, and it's not any unit in particular. I mean, Book certainly needs to get better off of where Pro Football Focus had him last year, but it really is where does Rees have this offense? Is he able to open this up? Unlock what has been a little bit of an albatross around the Irish neck, to be able to get them, really in the range where they can compete. You want to see progress because, from 22 where they were last year, you want to see them to be able to, solve out some of their problems, be able to put together longer drives, improve that drive efficiency number, be able to put together a lot more big plays, improve their explosive drives, right? These are across the board improvements that they're simply going to have to make. And, with Rees, are they able to run the ball more effectively than they were? And if not, then they've got to make it up throwing the ball. All of this is possible. So, Rees is a bright up and coming guy. It could definitely work. But we'll see. I mean, like I said, mileage may vary on a totally new play caller. On the defensive side, it is going to be adjusting to breaking in some new faces. They've been really good, really consistent. I really like the direction the defense is going under their DC. If they can keep that going and not fall off too much with all of their production losses, in particular, if you can see them grow and improve over the season, they really could be set for next year for, an excellent defense in South Bend. That would be something to absolutely keep an eye out for and watch for. So keep an eye out. This Notre Dame team, it'll be interesting as heck to see them in a conference, this year, playing for that. Keep an eye on how they're developing along, where the offensive coordinator, how he's doing, and really then how the defense is developing with, some younger players with a little less, game experience in there. So that's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Tomorrow, I actually forgot to look who we are previewing tomorrow. A total. No, that's not it. It's Florida at number 11. So we'll be doing Florida tomorrow. Anyway, thank you again for tuning in. You can find all the stats you just saw and a whole lot more at sharpcollegefootball.com. We have we buy data from the same folks that provide data to the College Football Playoff Committee. I'm an economist by background, so we run it through some econometrics. I mean, they're not necessarily econometric, really, but some hierarchical Bayesian models and come out with beta rank. And I'm Rob Bowron. I'm the mathlete behind Beta Rank. I tweet out from @BetaRankFB. I also handle the tweets from @SharpCollegeFootball. We have a Pac-12 podcast at 12 Pack Radio. You can find all the back episodes of that at sharpcollegefootball.com/12 Pack Radio. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tomorrow we're going to do the Florida Gators as we keep marching along. Stay safe out there, and we will see you